And George Song, and Umari Patangila, Conversene, Hig Doblatina, Umari Patera, and Pentatai, Jagum, Kosala, Jogum Lasso, Sanjin, Tonga Sabati, Ripatella, Conversena, and then Mubor Dembar and Batangi, Doparsa, Munzing Tower, and then Tawad, Shepalas, Tawatangi, Dobro.
We have heard the advice of the great master Atisha that it would be very useful if we would familiarize ourselves with the fact that everything is influenced by interdependent origination. Everything depends on causes and circumstances, and therefore to accept that fact and to familiarize yourself with that fact is good advice that we might follow. Now, the various ways of doing so are being taught explicitly within the tradition that is known as the Middle Way, or Uma in Tibetan, Madhyamika. There we have the various means, the various practices, the various types of analysis that allow us to examine and accordingly understand, come to understand how things truly are. And this is then taken even further after we have examined the world of appearances and phenomena as it so seemingly, as it appears to us so seemingly solid and truly existent. After we have come to understand that there is no such solidity, that there is no existence to anything of that which appears to ourselves, we then move onwards to the examination of that consciousness of ours which perceives all of these phenomena and appearances, which in the end turns out to be equally non-existent, equally empty of any inherent self-nature whatsoever. Now, all of these various means, what do they aim at? What do they bring about if we employ them? They bring about the collapse of the mistaken, erroneous idea that whatever it is that we perceive, whatever appears to ourselves, whatever phenomena we might encounter, has any self-nature, any substance, any existence out of itself, onto itself, by itself. There is no such thing, and that is exactly what is being brought about if we employ all of these various means, and exactly that fact that this is so is what we need to familiarize ourselves with.
And then, Sununchuna Tanki, Sema Tanki, Tang Charve, Nanka Tower Shizilas, Taumatawa Yang Tabashi, Tobawa, Sengenilu Yang Tabashi, Dona, then say Chu Tanki, Nanga Chu Tanki, Nanka Tabashi, then Sema Tong, Nanka Tabashi, then Dogre.
So Tenga and the Chitzen Dogre.
Temata, Chitima, Tamatana, Sananga, Bena, see your Tanki, Della, Dembaran Zambata. Then is Zambuga Chatanki, the Yedo Muana Zambata. Member Tanki, Yedo Muana Zambi, Temata, Demba, Sir Yola. Then Nanga Sana Yanaya, then to get certain Zambala, Soba.
If we were to practice or to examine accordingly, we would eventually come to discover that both outer phenomena and appearances, as well as everything that seems to be going on the inside, which means within our mind streams, that none of this has any substance unto itself whatsoever. It is not only the outer world that we perceive, goings on within this world that we perceive, to which we react, that is free of any inherent self-nature. It is also everything that goes on the inside, within our minds, within our consciousness, that equally is without any substance, without any self-nature. If we were to examine according to this particular tradition that is known as the Middle Way, as Madhyamika or Uma in Tibetan, then we will invariably come to that conclusion. Now it's up to ourselves to employ these means to actually bring this about. So if we do so, then the conclusion that we will eventually draw from that will exactly be that, and we will in the end come to understand that even though we constantly, habitually tag all sorts of labels and concepts onto whatever it is that we perceive, like agreeable or disagreeable, pleasant or unpleasant, that truly none of this is true. None of this has any validity whatsoever. When we look at phenomena and appearances of whatever kind, external or internal, we will eventually come to experience them to be just like space, like the sky itself.
Dancing in some the Denver trip the you song, Denver changing zone. Then is your tangi, Denver and changing zone tani, Tatella, Yunga Hijela, Yedu Wanke, Samanzai. Tela Dembe, I don't song a sana, Dashala, so a topa tangi, your tela. Yunga Hijela, the Naran Yedu Moon. I Jata, Nala never sing Tita Semanzai. Tela Tembe, Naron Songas, Shadam, Chadula, so the Topa Keg. That thing I don't so let on Bopa Tangi, Tenda, Munguri. Nyamumba Tela Tin, Utela Tin, Nyamumba Tangi, Tenda, Keg. Yena Yang, Ta Umagata Yang Tapa. Semjenilu Yang Tapa, Tonglen, the Chu the Tongi, Damba Madrup, Benna Naka Tavishi, Tung, Sema, Tarawaki, Chadong, Sema, Zoning, Sema, Dajing, and Sema, Lasso, Baton, Java, Tongi, Jars, Benna Naka Tavishi, La, Number Yago, so.
When we're talking about outer and inner phenomena and appearances, perceptions, things that happen to ourselves, react to, etc., and so forth. Like, what exactly is it that we're talking about? We're talking about all sorts of phenomena which seemingly have a very solid, a very real appearance, which nevertheless do not exist and have never existed in the first place. However, even if we have examined accordingly and if we have come to the conclusion that this truly is so, that appearances and phenomena have no self-nature, have no validity of any sort whatsoever, we have still habituated ourselves to grasp onto these and to give rise to all sorts of reactions. Now, if anything of that were truly as we think, as we perceive them to be, that in turn would mean that they actually would have to have a self-nature. The characteristics of something being agreeable or disagreeable, pleasant or unpleasant, would then have to be an inherent, self-existing part of all of these phenomena and appearances. That would mean that they would truly exist, that they would permanently be there or permanently be not there. So even though we have examined them as to their non-validity, their non-existence, we also have to learn how to deal with them, because there are still these habitual tendencies of ours to react in such ways or in other ways. So particularly, Rinpoche says, as we are beginners, we have to learn how to deal with all sorts of feelings or emotions that appear as a result of such and such circumstances. We have to learn with them, to deal with them in such a way as to not be overwhelmed by them. If we find ourselves in a situation in which anger or jealousy or whatever it might be for that matter appears, we have to learn not to allow ourselves to be carried away by these, but to also look at these reactions, these emotions that are being produced within ourselves as a result of perceiving these seemingly existent outer appearances and phenomena. Now, once we have determined that all of these phenomena truly are non-existent, have no validity, have no self-nature unto themselves whatsoever, in the very same way, we also have to deal with the reactions that they so habitually cause within ourselves. They are equally non-existent, they are equally unvalid, they are equally not there at all if we were only to look at them in the proper way, not allowing ourselves to fall under their influence right away, but take a moment to step back and look at what it is that's happening there. In the end, we would then come, if we were to employ the various means of reasoning and examining according to the middle way, we would come to the conclusion that whatever it is that we perceive, whatever it is that we encounter, both in ways of phenomena as well as in ways of how we react onto them, how we grasp or not grasp onto them, that all of this actually is free of any substance whatsoever and is none other, can be likened to nothing other but open space or the clear sky. Now, on the other hand, those who are unconscious of the fact that these phenomena, appearances, perceptions are truly non-existent, naturally, of course, believe that they are. They truly believe that there is an existence to whatever, there is an existence to anything of this, and therefore, naturally, they hold these appearances and phenomena to be true, which then, of course, logically, again, gives rise to all sorts of habitual ways of dealing with them. This then gives rise to pleasure or pain, to aversion or attachment, and all the consequences which follow thereof. That is the fundamental error that those find themselves under who believe in an inherent existence of whatever it is that they perceive, whatever it is that they encounter. Accordingly, it is said that those who find themselves under the influence of this mistaken belief that outer and inner phenomena, appearances, reactions, etc. are truly existence, they are blinded by that fact, they are blinded by that ignorance. And consequently, they suffer all the various reactions that result thereof as the various types of sufferings and deprivations and whatsoever. Such beings, it is then furthermore said, are the object of our own compassion. We look upon these, see them immersed in their fundamental error, and we give rise to great compassion for these beings because of their sorry state. Now, if we were to closely look at those who constantly find themselves immersed in their fundamental error, and who constantly, as a result thereof, undergo all sorts of untold sufferings, that, as has been said, therefore, in turn, ought to give rise to compassion, loving kindness within us towards these beings. And it ought to give rise to the wish from the bottom of our own hearts to liberate them of their suffering, or, so to speak, as it is said in the text here, literally, to find ways, find the means to dry up that immense ocean of unspeakable suffering. When we finally brought ourselves to considering others compassionately, who are constantly immersed in that error of believing that things have a true existence unto themselves, and who consequently suffer all sorts of disagreeable circumstances, that would be the moment when we could, or when we should actually apply the practice that we have heard about in last year's teaching, the practice that is known as the sending and taking, as it is said in that very root text, which incidentally also is by Atisha. It is said, train yourself in exchanging, or train in exchanging yourself by way of sending and taking. It is that practice which is commonly known as Tonglen. Now, if we were to practice this meditation, which primarily focuses upon one's own breath, this is rather actually simple to go about. As you sit and exhale, you imagine how, together with your exhalation, white, brilliant light is being radiated, and this light is being endowed with all the happiness, all the causes thereof, all the positive circumstances that you yourself enjoy. You imagine how all of this is being exhaled as white light, how it entirely pervades and suffuses the entire world and all the suffering beings within that world. And you imagine how they all partake of that happiness, of that joy and the causes thereof. Then as you inhale, you would imagine how you inhale together with your breath black light. And within this black light, you imagine all the negativity, all the suffering, the pain, the causes thereof, of all beings. And you take all of that upon yourself, thinking that whatever suffering these beings undergo may come to ripen within myself, may they become free of this suffering. And in this way you continue the practice for a while, exhaling white light endowed with all your happiness, with all your joy and the causes thereof, and inhaling black light and taking, by way of doing so, taking all the suffering and the causes thereof of other beings upon yourself. That is the predominant method that is to be employed according to the teaching of mind training spoken by Atisha himself.
Same get in the end, that the Nasa le Ungris or Namto Tendina, Sendon, Ludan, Tangi, Moji, Jacksina, Tenda, Moro, Namdula, Song, Mungashi, not only me, but Ganda, go, Nazuna, Chengasong, and a young secretary. Yena young Tenga, Semka, Namdoka, Zugawa, Madoga, Sanjay Tangi, Domarto, Susu, Le, De Passani, the deep again, Rivata, Coronson, Domarte, Young. They and Lonson Narum, Long of the Tetum Lane to Mari. Nalan Go, Young Mari, Lane to Mari.
Now, this particular practice of sending and taking, of exchanging yourself with others, taking their suffering and the causes thereof upon yourself, whereas you at the same time give away all your happiness and the causes thereof to them, invariably and again, causes at least some people to think that, well, if they were to do so, they would possibly cause themselves harm. If they were to imagine how through the inhalation they take the suffering and the causes thereof of others upon themselves, that they themselves would contaminate themselves and that they themselves would then actually experience the sufferings, the sicknesses for that matter, of others. Some do so to such an extent that occasionally they might even think that already my head starts to hurt. Already I have a headache, so here's the proof, it actually works that way, and they get very afraid and very upset about it. Now Rinpoche says very clearly that is a mistaken idea. That is nothing but a thought, an assumption, which is devoid of any truth, devoid of any any substance whatsoever. The practice of giving and taking, as beneficial as it is, does not endow us with the possibility to truly, actually take, for instance, the sickness of someone else upon ourselves, simply because of the simple fact that each and every being suffers only that which it has caused itself. There is no way how we can truly could take the suffering of others upon ourselves, because we can only suffer that which we have caused by ourselves. We cannot actually take causes as well as results thereof away from others. So whatever idea might appear in our minds, whatever fear might appear in our minds for that matter, that we could possibly cause ourselves harm by way of practicing giving and taking, that is a mistaken idea, and we can sit back and relax, because that is not the case. So there's no need to be worried in this way, in any way whatsoever.
Sambandare. Dalla tene, tenin kovalan chongdu. Tati yendu, na sambati yoba telatin, na la nasa yungri, na la dipa go yungri, na la trapdu matsuangri, na la me jambake, milu taungri.
Milu?
Samsa yapuchi. Nala making Mande Basi Yung. Tindawa Sangra, Tindawa, dog and Zamba, Zojita and you were Koa Tuma Mapan and Aron, Koa and Chamas, yet a dog and Zambandari. At the end of sending Tangi get the one out of your and Mipatenda gone, dog and Zambadi days in my Marador. They need up the pentures. Then in Tartu get pentuti, Tata Lonso, Naron the Senking Dunga, Long Napu Nambangaru, Lenayon, Senking Dunga, Lamson, Naranga, Mebati to Marit, Yenayon, Tata Tenda, Lord Jong, Big Bargon, Kiwa Jimala, that Senking Dunga Kandi Yori, Ticket Dunga, job topic, Nipaking Aram, heavy with it. Tata song to sang Mipala, Gambala, then Tartu get Penture.
We've just heard that if we practice this meditation of Tonglen, of sending and taking, that we do not need to worry, that we truly take the sicknesses and sufferings and pains of others upon ourselves, that there is no way how we could take a sickness upon ourselves or contaminate ourselves in any which way so that we would actually undergo the suffering of someone else. Now, if that's the case, we might wonder what on earth is the point of this practice in the first place. Why do we practice so if it does not bring about that result which we are seemingly after? That is exactly that fear which appears within our mind, like, oh goodness, I could possibly contract a disease, or I could possibly take pains upon myself, and already my head starts to hurt and I feel sick. When that thought appears, then already the very point of the practice is demonstrated right in our face. What that practice does is it chisels away at that very mistaken idea of ours that there truly is a self. As long as we believe there is a self, as long as we find ourselves under the influence of that which is very literally called ego clinging or self-clinging, as long as that is the case, we find ourselves under a very mistaken idea. Haven't we heard time and again that apart from everything else, also that which is called a self does not exist? Haven't we heard time and again that there is no such thing as a self, as an ego? Of course we have, but still we find ourselves habituated to wanting to protect that, in the end, non-existent self. So that is the actual point of the practice itself, that we learn to take ourselves less and less important and to put the benefit and welfare of others above ourselves. Now, needless to say that, particularly as beginners as we are, that of course we are unable, even through such practice, to quickly and efficiently alleviate the suffering of others. There's no way how we can do so in great style. But if we were to, in turn, habituate ourselves to such practice, then that would have the immeasurably great result of our being able to protect others to the best of our ability, to work for the welfare of others to the best of our ability in future lifetimes. So even though it is obvious that right now, practice Tonglen as much as we might, we will not bring about a visible, a graspable result, even though that is the case, we still bring about great benefit that will definitely come to the fore, that will definitely manifest itself in the future, and even if it be in future lifetimes. Now we've come to the point where it's time for questions, should there be any.